Hello and welcome back for another episode of this season of Try This on the Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritsen, and we are almost there. We started this podcast. Oh man, I think, was it back in January? Yeah. So about 6 months ago. And I remember starting this podcast and thinking, okay, I planned an outline for all the different things we were going to talk about over the next at least 2 months. And then I was like, well, we'll just see where it goes from there. And I thought, man, it just seems kind of far away in that sense. I don't know how I'm going to do an episode a week and what I'm going to talk about, but we made it. I think actually this podcast helped a lot in many different ways because it just helped me put together a lot of the things that I've been learning over this past year. I started training with my coach almost exactly a year ago. And I'd been training a little bit before that, but I wasn't nearly as prepared as I am now, that's for sure. And I've just put so much of everything into this year, just trying to learn everything I possibly can. And so it's crazy that we're about a week out. We're 6 days next. The Ironman race is next Sunday, so the 27th, and it's in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. This last week with training, I've been in taper week the past week and then running into this week, which just means that like a lot of the workouts are kind of like just move, and they're a couple hours or an hour or less. And it's just moving and not necessarily expecting a whole lot out of my body necessarily, or out of the training in and of itself. It's just moving and kind of keeping things going, keeping everything, just going through the motions almost. So let's see, this last week I had, some runs, I had some bikes, I had some swims, but on Saturday, I had a run, which I did beforehand. And then I went out and swam after. So that was actually really interesting because it was in the Clackamas River again. I remember a couple weeks ago, I was in the Clackamas River and it was 53 degrees. It wasn't much warmer on Saturday. It was still really, really cold, but it's just crazy. And this is why you do this, right? Like, this is why my coach was like, I need you to get into open water. And what's interesting about it though, is that the first weekend that I was in open water, that was when it was 53 degrees in the Clackamas River. And then the week later I was at my parents' house in Seattle and their lake was like 60 something degrees. I barely even needed a wetsuit because of how warm it felt compared to the Clackamas River. Right. So then we went back, and my sister-in-law came out with me, and cause she goes on the paddleboard. And she just like escorts me down the river. It's awesome. But I jumped into that water, and it didn't take me nearly as long to get in it. I just said, okay, like, are you ready to go? She was ready. I was ready. So jumped in, and it just took a little bit to get used to it. But that's the point, right? Is Coeur d'Alene, but Lake Coeur d'Alene could be just as cold. So having that experience of knowing what to expect and doing that several times and already seeing my confidence build in that water is huge for my mindset and for feeling a little bit more prepared. And what was really cool about it too was like, I wasn't necessarily trying to go fast. I was just trying to get some time in. It was about a 45-minute swim, and I made it the distance of a half Ironman, about 2,200 yards. And I did that in 45 minutes, which is what I did back in Whistler in 2019. But this was after a run. There were a couple times I had to stop because I needed to put like my goggles. I needed to deal with my goggles. And then there was a lot of dodging things. There were a lot of boats in the water. There was fishing line everywhere. So it was just a lot of like managing different things. But it was really cool because once we got into more of like the, we were past a bunch of the boats, so it was a lot less busy. Oh man, the river just like opened up into this canyon, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I was swimming in very clear water. I could see the bottom. And then as I would look up to take a breath, I got to see this massive canyon. And I was telling my sister-in-law afterwards, I was like, this was so cool. Like, I didn't really want to stop swimming because I just was loving exploring. And I never would have said that. Like, that's why I really like the bike portions, is because I get to go out and explore different areas, and I get to go see a lot of different places that I wouldn't usually. And I try to get out into kind of wildernessy type places. So that's something that I really, really enjoy. So being able to see that from a different perspective, doing some open water swimming was really, really cool. It was such an interesting experience that I wouldn't have expected. So it's been a good week. Had a couple of also some good bike rides. And then now going into this week, I have a run today. It's going to be 95 degrees today. And so I'm going to try to get out there in the heat and just get used to that a little bit. I won't get any like heat acclimatization or anything like acclimatization. That's what it's called. I won't get anything like that, or heat acclimation. They're two different things, but I won't get any of that necessarily, but it would be nice to kind of know what to expect when it's going to be pretty hot. Sounds like in Coeur d'Alene, the weather will be maybe 90-ish degrees on Sunday. So that's going to be very, very, very hot, be very cold water, and then a very hot end to the day, which means I'm going to be exhausted. It takes so long for me to get warmed up again from the cold water. And it just takes so much out of me. So hopefully it won't be that bad. But so that's what the rest of this week really looks like. I've got to run today. I've got to swim tomorrow. And then it'll just be some bikes and swims and runs and just short, light stuff. Just trying to get the body adapted and rested and recovered so that when race day comes, we're good to go. I haven't necessarily experienced anything like taper sickness, which is a thing, and it does happen. I haven't really been noticing too much. Yesterday after that cold swim and run, I was pretty worn out and I just felt just like really fatigued. But so I just kind of took it easy and was trying to just get ready to go, because there's so much prep work that goes into getting ready to go, because we have a farm and all that stuff. So just a lot. But let's talk about what we're here for today. So in this podcast, I mean, we've covered so many topics, from like nutrition to recovery to bike fitting to troubleshooting GI issues to hydration and so much more, right, over the past several months. And it's hard. It's like, honestly, for me, it's really hard to believe that we're finally here. Like it just still blows my mind. So today, what I really wanted to do was talk about a few things that I'm basically keeping in mind as I head into race day. And I do this for a lot of the different races that I've done in the past. And it does help a lot. So I'm going to give you some of my tips as far as how I get prepared. So first and foremost, you want to make sure you have a checklist, right? We did a podcast a little bit ago about transitions and all of that, and just like getting ready to go. And there was a picture that we posted that has like all of my stuff laid out. And that's something that can be really helpful, because what I like to do is I like to organize everything by event, right? So I have all my swim stuff, I have all my bike stuff, and all my running stuff. And then what I do is I put that all into one bag. We need to make sure that we have all the obvious things, right? Like bike shoes and our helmets, but also things like the stretchy clip-on thing that holds onto your bib instead of using like safety pins, that they give you. It always is those like super random things, or it's a big thing like running shoes that you forget. So I'm also bringing, so you want to make sure you don't forget those things. And then I'm also bringing both of my wetsuits, because I have one that has sleeves, and I have a sleeveless one, which I prefer to swim in. But if the water is too cold, I'll definitely be wearing my full suit. So we'll see how that goes. But you want to lay everything out. And then you also want to have a checklist for all of your other gear. So like, do you need anything for your bike? Do you need anything for, putting your bike back together? Do you need, and then you want to talk about all of your hydration and fueling. And then don't forget, water bottles, things like that. What kind of race recovery drink are you going to have afterwards? So you want to make sure that somebody has that ready to go for you. At the end, there's, Yeah. So there's a lot of different stuff like that. What type of food are you going to be consuming, the morning of? If it's something special, like a particular type of oatmeal that you like, or granola, or if you drink something, you need to make sure you have those. So it's really important to kind of have a checklist laid out of all of the things that you need. Also, not to forget all of your hydration stuff if you're doing anything particular with that. I even go as far as, baggies, like Ziploc baggies. If you're putting some of your fueling or stuff in those, you want to try to bring everything. Of course, most places have stores, so that makes it a little bit easier if you forget something. But ultimately, if you can just have everything prepared, just think every single, portion of the day, what are you going to need? Then it's all done and it's all ready to go, so that when race weekend comes, you just do. I actually had a dream last night, maybe partially nightmare, that I had forgotten like a ton of the fueling stuff that I needed, like my bars and things like that. And then it just was like one thing after the other. I like got to race day and I just like didn't have any of my fueling stuff. I didn't have a lot of different things. And I think in my dream, I was just like, how is this happening? Like, how is this possible? I've prepared for this for so long. How have I forgotten all of these things? But the next point that you want to do too, so having a checklist is obviously very, very important. It's so important to make sure that you just don't forget anything. As I said, yes, usually places have stores, but you don't want to forget your bike shoes. You don't want to forget your running shoes. You don't want to forget some of those bigger things. And it's really helpful to pack a few days ahead of time, so that if you do by chance forget something, you'll likely know about it before you leave. Unless you're just like the other side of that is like packing right, like the night before as quickly as possible. Trying to avoid those types of situations is usually better when it's something big, kind of like this. The next piece is practice for the unexpected. So it's almost always guaranteed that something will not go as planned. I've been asked so many times, like, are you ready for this race? Are you excited? Are you ready to do this? And, I always say, yeah, I'm like really excited, but I'm also very nervous because I have a tendency to like to control things in some ways. And I'm a planner. So like, I really like to know how things are going to go and all of those steps and things. The thing with Ironman races or any type of triathlon is that usually something doesn't go as planned. So the point is to have a plan, right? And then if something goes awry, you adjust and adapt. And that's the name of the game, right? With triathlon, the goal is to ideally make a good choice and adapt really quickly and then move on. I was watching a video of a friend of mine that is a cyclist, and he races. And I watched a race of him getting, taken out with a kind of group of other cyclists. And he used it as a coaching thing to kind of explain how to, just check in with yourself. He kind of looked around. He was like, am I bleeding? Are things okay? And then he realized like, yeah, he was fine. And the first thing he did was make sure his bike was ready to go. And he was on his bike and off. And that is kind of the point, right? Is that you want to make sure that if something bad does happen, you have a plan for it and you know how to adapt. So that's like, do you know how to change a tire? Do you know what you're going to do if you lose a fueling bottle, right? Like, or your particular hydration bottle on the bike because the roads were bumpy. There's so many different things that can happen. Or maybe like your wetsuit rips, or like as you're putting it on and getting ready to go in the water, there's so many different things that can happen. And sometimes what's helpful is to visualize the race and think about in each section, what could go wrong. Like maybe your goggles break or snap, or maybe you lose them for like somehow, I don't know. There's lots of different things that can happen, but in each piece kind of think about what are some of the things that could go wrong, and just know like, okay, if that is the case, what am I going to do about it? Well, let's say you lose your hydration bottle or fueling bottle, then that's okay. We just at the next stop, we need to load up, right? And we need to just grab what they have. It's better to grab what they have than nothing at all. So things like that. You might even consider packing some extra of the hydration packets, of whatever you use, packing those in the back of your tri kit, your whatever you're wearing. Usually they have pockets, those like cycling shirts and things like that. Like, you could pack some things back there so that you could just grab their straight water and then pour your hydration in there instead of relying on something that they have on the race course, like aside, whatever they're preparing for you. But at the same time, you could still do those too, right? So there's lots of options. It's just, if you think about it ahead of time, like, what am I going to do? Then that can be helpful. Okay, keep listening because we will be right back with more after this. The next tip is don't forget about your shoes. So a week before, this might not be the time. It might be a little too late for this, but it's so common for runners to go into their marathon or into their triathlon and have been running on those shoes for months and months and months. So that's really something to keep in mind as well. Maybe a couple months ahead of time, it would be better to think about this, or at least a month ahead so you can get them broken in. But running shoes usually only have about 300 miles before they really do need to be replaced. And this is a very common issue as far as like injuries go. I have runners that come in that have been running on shoes for a very, very, very long time, and they're wondering why their feet are hurting, or they've, ended up with some calf Achilles type stuff or knee pain, and they haven't replaced their shoes in like forever, and they run miles and miles and miles. So important to know that, my shoes will be fine. I didn't need to necessarily worry about that, but just something to consider, because especially when you're running a lot, then that can be a factor to keep in mind. The other thing that I'm mentioning as well is I'm reminding myself over and over to keep a good pace on the bike. So this list is somewhat specific to me, but these are all things to think about. I don't really want to go overboard as far as the bike portion goes, because it's really easy for me to want to push because I enjoy it so much. It's my favorite part of triathlon is the bike, because I really like to go and explore. I'd say maybe the swim is becoming a little bit more comfortable for me, and I do like that, but I don't really love being around a bunch of other people. So I wouldn't say that the swim is my favorite, and the run is definitely not my favorite, but the bike is probably most my favorite out of all of them. And that's mostly because I really like to go and explore. Like, I just really enjoy being out there on the bike. I'm not very comfortable on it. I'm getting a lot better at that, and I've learned a lot of tips from my coach, but it's just the idea of being out there on my bike is what I like the most. So, and I've trained so much on the bike. My goal is just to have a really good solid bike portion of this race, but not get so excited that I push too hard and then end up having like an agonizing run afterwards. The tricky part is making sure I don't underbike either. So I'm going to have to find that sweet spot. And that's that. I'll probably be doing, for the run portion, a 9-minute run and a 1-minute walk ish. I might switch that up depending on how I'm feeling, but my goal is to do a 9-minute run, 1-minute walk. It's how I've been doing a lot of my training. And I think that will be a pretty solid strategy for just helping to reset as I go. And we've talked about this before as well, as far as strategies for the run, but you can often go farther in a shorter amount of time if you put in strategic walk breaks, because what that does is it helps your body reset, and it'll help you keep your form for a lot longer. So you ideally don't hurt quite as bad when you get to the end, but you also don't fatigue too much either. So that's kind of the idea behind that. I think it'll be a little bit tricky for me to walk towards the beginning, because I'm just going to want to go, but that's part of being a smart athlete, is doing what you need. So last things before we wrap up. Remember that this is something that I'm going to be keeping in mind. Remember the episode we talked about, it was quite a bit ago, about going in with no expectations. I don't mean low expectations. I mean no expectations. So the point of this is to take the pressure off, because okay, the whole point of this entire podcast of Try This is it's for your age. It's for age group athletes. It's not for our elite pro athletes. This is like, and it's very likely that this is potentially your first race, just like it is for me. So it's your first race. If you set any expectations, it puts pressure on. And then the point is if you put the pressure on, then it's likely that you may not enjoy it as much as you possibly could. So the point really is to go out and have fun and enjoy the day. Once you've tackled your first one, then that's when you can get to have a chat with your coach and start laying down some strategies for the next one. But the first one, that one is the one to just enjoy and have fun. And I am trying to remind myself of that a lot this race, because, and I work with some athletes who have done many of these, and they know that they have some issues with either like cramping, or they have issues with fueling, or a number of different things. And so we were working with them based off their previous experiences. But if you don't have a previous experience for an Ironman, then the point is just to go and have fun and see how you do. I'm not saying don't strive to do your best, right? So like the idea of just finishing is definitely a goal, and that's a great goal. But we also want to try to do our best as well. So I'm not necessarily going out there just to see I'm going out there to see what I can do and see how this year's training has gone. I'm very curious. I'm definitely going to be out there to test what I've learned, both in training and with hydration and fueling. As much as I'm going out there to have fun and to actually enjoy this race, because that was one of my very key things that I wanted, was to go into, as you've heard, if you've listened to the first episode that we ever did on this podcast, like I've had plenty of races where things did not go well because I was not trained for it. And I've put myself through that plenty of times, and I just want to go out there and perform really well. And I really want to have a good race and one that I actually enjoy. So that's what I'm going out there to do. And so I'm really curious to see what I can do and where we end up. But I'm not trying to put these like excess goals and pace expectations on myself, because ultimately that's going to do, it's not a great spot for me to put myself in. And the reason for that is because my mantra for the day is to be calm, focused, and fueled. So those are like the three things that I want to keep in mind: calm, focused, and fueled. Calm, because I can get very emotional and wrapped up and frustrated when things don't quite go right. Focused, because I don't really have a whole lot of problems staying focused, but it's a good thing to just keep in mind, especially on the run. And then staying fueled. So the primary goal for this whole race, because it's going to be potentially 95 degrees that day, is to stay fueled so that I keep my energy up for the run. And then also to stay hydrated. And that's going to be one of the trickiest things, is to just try to push off and ward off dehydration as much as possible. And then the last thing I'm going to be doing is reminding myself to smile. You may have known this as we've gotten through this podcast, but I'm a fairly serious person. So in any kind of race event, it's very easy for me to buckle down and just drive. Persevering through difficult situations is something that I know very well. So I'm trying to remind myself this time to relax a little bit, especially on the bike, and to make sure that I smile, because not everything has to be quite so serious all the time. And I do want to be able to enjoy it and have a good day. So that's it. I'm really excited to take this on, and we'll be back with an episode next week, right afterwards, to recap the entire race and how it goes. So hopefully I have really good things to report. But yeah, we've made it. We've made it to the day. So if you've been listening, thank you so much for joining me along on this journey. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. And that's we'll see how it goes. So make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels, and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think may love it. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find anything, the clinic or whatever, at drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions about this episode, you can by email at info@wispsports.com, and then you can always leave a direct message with either of us over on social media as well. Thank you for listening, and I will be back next week with the recap of how the race goes. So hope you all have a great week and take care.